Hi, now we're going to draw the farmhouse to go with the video, Little Ice Age, Big Chill. During the Middle Ages, things truly did break down. They didn't just forget to read and write and how to do it and how to have a lot of the organization that was part of the daily life of a Roman citizen in, say, 700 BC or something like that, or I don't know, 100, I guess. But they didn't forget how to make that arch, so let's go ahead and make a little arch. You would put your farmhouse near a creek because you needed water. And it would have your keystone, so you want to build all your stones. That was probably the hardest work, was building that little bridge so that you could cross back and forth. And it would be all banked in with stone. The stone that made the arch had to be carved and made to fit. But then when you made the stones that fit around it, those could be somewhat fitted, but they could be smaller, so you can make them just sort of go together like this. And many times they actually stayed in place by just the sheer weight of the stone. So I'm just putting them in different sizes because this is a much more rustic look than the Romans would have had. And we're going to angle that line back and then come up, and all of this would be in shadow. And you can shadow that in with watercolor later. Right now we're just putting the stones in that would hold the bridge in place. And you want to put them together kind of like weird shaped Legos. So they don't have to be, I don't know, offset quite as much, but they do have to fill in all the holes. So this would, and some of the stones would be big and some of the stones would be small. And you would probably keep an eye on it and maybe come and fill in or pound in any stones that started to slip out of place. Or even if the stone cracked and you had to fill it in with smaller stones, you would do that, because that was part of the upkeep of your farm. So as you can see, it's pretty random. We'd have our creek here. And I would put some typical plants that are part of the area around water. This would be brown. Then you would have the wooden part, and you'd have this, you wouldn't make this out of stone normally just because it would be difficult and would be more time consuming. And this is to keep your animals from falling off into the water. Because when you bring your sheep over from grazing, and these pieces of wood here would be uneven because you didn't have a planer to make them all even. You just wouldn't have it. And this would be a hill. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but when streams go down an area, they erode and the sides are up. And only during flooding is it a problem with it overflowing, which I'm sure they had problems with. This would be road here, and that'd probably just be dirt. They're not going to pave it. They don't have that kind of time. And then you have a post on the other side, and that post would be smaller and thinner because it's further away. It's only an illusion. I mean, they're not going to go to the Lowe's and get everything all the same size. They'd probably try and make it approximately the same size, but notice that it's down on the other side. So here's my fence for the other side and the post for the other side. And you'd set it pretty far into the ground so that your animals would come across here and they wouldn't fall in, as I said. And then you have your buildings back here. And interestingly enough, a lot of the buildings that were made during the Middle Ages are still in use. Now we're going to put a doorway here and we're going to put it at what's called a Dutch door. So it's made of wood, and this part would be wood right here, and then this part would be open right here, and that would let the light in. They didn't have many windows. And then we'd have a wood frame around this that would hold it in place. And then you have some pieces here and maybe a piece here. And then if it's offset, yeah, that would be pretty much, they didn't measure a lot. The wood was often kind of made higgly-piggly. And it's real interesting, I will show you in class images of structures that were made during these time period between 1360 and 1800, and they still in use. I mean, yeah, they were kind of rough, and I'm going to put the wood down here because they'd frame it in. I don't know if you've ever noticed how structures are framed, but they would frame it and then they build stuff around it. And a lot of times they were a little rougher than we are normally used to seeing. Notice this angle goes up. That's perspective. And then they might have a wooden door there that would close and lock from the inside. And also they would have sheepskin, or vellum as it's called, to use as a window because they didn't have the money for glass. Now, there would be a second story, and that would be a loft where probably the family would sleep. And there is an opening right here, and I'm going to take my pencil. This is why I don't like mechanical pencils. You can't do that. This is opening because they did not have chimneys. And you're thinking, well, what? Well, fireplaces were actually pretty avant-garde new stuff. They were like solar plates on your roof. They had them in the Tower of London, which we drew, but they were sort of folded over in corners. It isn't till much later they have fireplaces like we know. And then out here in the field, as the family grew or they added more animals or whatever, they would put another structure. And we would think of it as a barn, but as it got colder, they brought their animals inside, and that's what they told you in the movie that you watched. And the roof on these were thatched roofs. That was made out of straw. So somebody had to stay up and watch the fires. And it was generally kids who were old enough to walk and talk, like 7 or 8, but were really too young to be doing too much out in the fields. They did not go to school. They didn't have time. They were too busy trying to survive. So we're going to put a structure back here, and we're also going to give it a fireplace because they had to keep the animals warm, and somebody had to stay out there and keep that fire going. And this would all be wood, and it would be dark brown. And I will have some drawings for you to look at. Again, there would be a door here. Now, you may be wondering why they would have a Dutch door. Well, they often had their little chickens running around to feed, and then they would bring the chicken in when it got cold, but they didn't want the chicken in the house all the time. The chicken would make a mess. So they would have a Dutch door to let light in so the ladies could cook, or whoever was cooking, mostly ladies. And then these are pretty higgly-piggly made because they were higgly-piggly made, and we'll look at them. Okay, out here we're going to have fields, and if you wanted to put a tree here, you could. They often also had, and I'll put a mountain, a little, not a mountain, but like a hill, a cellar, and the cellar would be built into the ground. My grandfather had one of these, and he would put apples and things down there because they didn't have a refrigerator. So this would have grass on it, but it would have a doorway into it. It's sort of like a sod house like the pioneers had. So you want to have lots of vegetation here along the creek. And you'll have your water moving through here, and it would go off to the side so you wouldn't see it over here. And then if you wanted to put another structure in, you could, but this is probably fine. This was a typical farmhouse from about, really, 1200 to around 1700. They started to get more stone and brick in the 1800s, partly because of fire. That was a real issue. Now, once you get it colored, and I'll show you what I mean, I'm going to have you put this glitter on it. And that glitter represents snow, because it would turn to snow at the drop of a hat. Like today, with the weather, we have an unpredictable situation now. We had a lovely day today. The flowers are starting to bloom, and everything thinks it's great, but it's not. It's not good at all, because these things are going to die. Notice her plants here, and she really made hers odd shaped. But this is what it should look like. The wood, she didn't put a Dutch door in. I think maybe she missed that, but it's still a very lovely piece of work. And this is where you would store your onions, potatoes, apples, peaches, whatever you had grown. And you would bring your chickens in at night because there were wolves and such. Or marauding dogs. I mean, there was all sorts of things that could eat your little creatures. But anyway, that is how you do it. I'm moving, because I was out several days, I'm moving the due date to next Tuesday. But you really do need to get it in, because we're starting to close the grading period. So anything you're missing, get it done. And you can have grass and green grass and everything, because this happened suddenly. And it's going to happen suddenly, I guess, tomorrow. So we have a lot of the same issues they had during the Little Ice Age. Okay, see you in class. Bye.